Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spurs from the Stands. I'm Sarah, and I wasn't looking forward to doing this video. I'm going to be completely honest. It's been a bit of an emotional 24 hours, should we say that? And look, it's normal after watching a game of football when you're so invested in your team and as a fan, you're passionate about things to get despondent about the situation. So, as always, with these videos, I thought I'd take a step back, sleep on it, and come back to you with a bit of more of a leveled analysis of what played down yesterday. And of course, the main talking point of all of this is going to be about Romero, because I think how the majority of people saw this game as Spurs fans was as much as perhaps we weren't on top in those first 30 minutes. We certainly had more opportunity in the game, or at least more opportunities to create something in the game compared to when Romero went off and we went down to 10 men. Now, I've seen there was over 100 and excuse me, there was over 120 comments on that video that I did yesterday. And some people were Man United fans in the comments and telling us that we should give them credit where credit is due. But in all honesty, I'm still not convinced that, if all of our players were on the pitch, the game plays out like that. And look, fair play to United. Yes, they're on a caretaker bounce. Yes, they played better than us on the day. But the truth is that we'll never know what would have happened if there was 11 men on those pitch. You guys can say that you still would have won the game, and we can say we would have taken something from the game. But that's not how things played out. So the question you then ask yourself is, what caused this scenario to happen? Because you can't predict things like this. And you can say, yes, it's very unfortunate and very unlucky for Romero. However, when I think more deeply about this, and the question that I've been asking is, what's the reason that this has become a recurring pattern for Romero? How is this the situation that from last year, he looked like he was a much more disciplined player. He looked like he wasn't getting as many yellow cards. He wasn't throwing himself into rash challenges. And so there's a few reasons why I've come to sort of these conclusions. The first of which is I don't think the tactics suit him. And this is not down to Frank's tactics universally being terrible. I just think that Romero is not the type of player who wants to play low block football, sitting behind the ball, because that means that as a defender, you have more to do. And I don't think that necessarily suits his style of play, because he gets frustrated and that leads him to then go into challenges. Now, there's a bigger question in all of this, because of course you could say, well, in Frank plays this sort of phases of the game. And so we know that in the first phase of the game, we tend to sit back, which is not Tottenham Hotspur's style, but it's also not Romero's style. Romero is through and through a Spurs player, and he plays with flair when he's on a good day. So I think the first conclusion that I've come to, and you guys let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with this analysis, is that I just don't think the style of play suits him as a player. Now, in the bigger picture of things, there is also the question around his not mannerism, but around his his character. And obviously, coming out midweek, it's not the first time that he's done it. Of course, we know that it's not the first season that he's done it. He's done it a couple of times this season, but he's also done it in previous seasons as well. So then comes the bigger question of, is Romero really aligned in the direction of where this club is going? Because look, as I said in the video a couple of videos ago, I said that when you have a squad, you've got to have everyone who's on the same page in order to create alignment and be successful. There are many teams where players, you're never going to have 100% of the dressing room that's on board. But in order to create alignment, in order to be successful, you need to have at the very bare minimum, the leadership on board with that. And Romero carries that badge. He carries the captaincy. And with that responsibility, comes the power to, influence your dressing room. And you can have influence in both a negative and a positive way. And from what I'm seeing, the repercussions of all of his actions, not just on the pitch, but his entire persona that he has, is not helpful to the squad at large. And not only is it not helpful to the squad at large, it's also not helpful for the people at the top. It's not helpful to Frank, and it's not helpful to the board, right? Now, if you're the board, you would argue, maybe he's not a player that you want to keep around long term. Now, they might have had negotiations or discussions in the back room over the past few weeks since Romero's last few outbursts. And so let's just say, look, we're never going to know if Romero was fined, but I do think it's fair to say that part of potentially Romero's contract with the club was so that he would be in the leadership group and potentially even be the captain. Now, with that comes certain responsibilities. You have a certain level to uphold when you are the captain of the club, whether that be facing your teammates, whether that be facing the fans and the support, or whether that be being on board with the people that are hiring you. And from what I can see, he's not aligned with any of that. And that for me is my biggest problem. My biggest challenge that I have with this Romero situation, and I know there's a conversation around, do we let him go? Do we not let him go this summer? I've seen some people say that he should be sticking around. Now, for me personally, I don't think it's healthy to have a toxic character in the dressing room. I think it's really destructive. Now, fair play, Romero is a passionate character. But then you come to the question of why, for the international team, does he not get the same amount of red cards as he does for Tottenham Hotspur? And it got me thinking, because I was having this conversation with a friend last night, and it got me thinking that when he plays for Argentina, if he was to come out like this and play like this, Messi would soon have something to say. Messi would be like, you're costing the team. What the hell are you doing? The challenge we have at Tottenham is that Romero is the guy. There's no one above him to keep him in check. And if you don't have a manager or a coach who is going to discipline your character in certain ways that are going to benefit the team at large, then you're lacking leadership. So I think this is a failed leadership from Romero, but I do think that this is also a failed leadership from Frank, and I also think this is failed leadership from the board, from his bosses, the people that signed him in the first place. Essentially, these are the people who his contract is with. So some of you have been saying, he never gets a red card for Argentina, and I take that point on board because I think it's completely valid. Now, you could say, well, the Premier League is more intense. You could say that, because of his passionate character, that he goes into challenges. But however, there is a difference between being reckless and being controlled. And it got me thinking again about the bigger picture of things, about how we start games. We initially lose control. Now, something very interesting that came up on my Instagram, to be honest, in my coaching world, was this phrase from a guy called David Guillaume. And he said, when you're no longer reactive, needy, or charged, that's when you can trust your intuition. Before then, your intuition will be off. Once you feel whole inside, follow what comes to you, even when it doesn't make sense yet. That's how you see miracles very quickly. Now, look, this is not a plug about spirituality or anything like that, but it is true to say that when you feel like you're out of control, your decision making is jaded, right? Your decision making is clouded by the external situations that are going on around you. Now, how do you overcome that? You become more whole in yourself. You become more aligned in yourself. And for me, I don't think Romero is aligned and whole in himself by being a Tottenham Hotspur player. He's not aligned on many different fronts. He's not aligned with the club. He's not always necessarily aligned with his teammates, you know? So I think, no, he's never going to publicly throw his teammates under the bus. But we don't know what goes on in that back room. And all we can assume is if you're not seeing alignment on the pitch, that means that there is misalignment on a player level, on a group level, on a club level. And so, you know, when you're able to trust your intuition, how do we get to that place? You get to that place of trusting your intuition, of believing in the values and the framework that have been set out, and you play to that. On the pitch, you play to that. You play to your identity. You play to the belief systems that you set out, which incorporates the tactics, but also the mindset that comes with that. And so you can't have a player in your midst who is not aligned, because you're not going to create the alignment in the squad at large. And so my biggest challenge with all of this is, first of all, the misalignment. We will never see success at this club. We will never create that miracle that we need to maintain our position in the Premier League if your leaders in the group, first and foremost, are not upholding that standard. So Romero does not uphold that standard for us. Now, of course, he threw the board under the bus earlier this week and said it was a disgrace. Now, one of the things that I take issue with is that he hasn't taken responsibility. And this, for me, is more painful than the act of him getting sent off himself. And the reason why I say this is because situations like that happen in football, right? You can go into a challenge, it can be mistimed, and that can cost your team. But to then not come out as the leader of the group and not say anything. And look, Romero still has time. He might still post something, but he hasn't posted anything on social media. And for a guy who is so vocal on social media, the lack of accountability for me is more of an issue than the act of getting sent off in and of itself. And I don't know how you guys feel to that, but I think that that is a massive misstep for our leader. And I'm going to share with you one of our other players who's currently out on loan. And this guy is Will Lancashire, who got sent off yesterday against Oxford. He was playing for Oxford. And I think off the top of my head, they played Coventry. Let me just check I got that right. Did they play Coventry? How annoying, I can't find it. Yes, they play Coventry. So the game ended 0-0 between Coventry and Oxford yesterday. Now, obviously, Lancashire I think he's about 19 years old. He's one of our youth that's gone out on loan, and he got sent off at 57 minutes. And this was his statement on Instagram today. I'd like to apologise for yesterday. I'll always give my all for this football club and compete for every single ball. However, in the circumstances, I should have avoided it. I will learn from it and keep moving forward. The boys showed the fight and spirit, which we have shown all season, to see out the game, and the fans were exceptional as usual. Let's get behind the team Tuesday. Come on, you yellows. So it got me thinking when I saw this pop up on my Instagram, because Lancashire is a young kid, and to come out and to take responsibility in the way that he has is something that I don't see Romero do. When we lose games, he doesn't come out in press releases. He doesn't take ownership and accountability for the failures that he is part of. He pushes the blame on other areas. Now, we know that there's loads of holes in this football club, but by not taking responsibility for your own actions, you are part of that problem. And this is why I said in my rant yesterday that Romero's ego is bigger than this club, because he doesn't believe that he is part of the problem. And maybe he does on some level, and maybe he's apologized to his fellow teammates in the back room. But as fans, that's not what we've heard. And so you can come out and you can throw people under the bus, but when it's your turn to take accountability and to take responsibility as the captain and as the leader, that's what I expect. And I think that is a massive, massive failure from our captain, not coming out and not taking ownership. The difference between Will Lancashire and Christian Romero is that Christian Romero is a mature player. The guy is 26, 27 years old. He has almost a decade on Lancashire. And so for a player like Lancashire to come out and make apologies for going into challenges and then Romero not doing so, I think that that is really, really disappointing. I don't know. What do you guys think to that? Because as I said, players can get sent off. It happens. But to not come out and own it and to not take responsibility for that publicly, I think that's a lack of foresight. And I think that's also going to be part of Romero's personal brand in his downfall. Because look, if he would come out and just say, guys, like this was the situation, not I lost my head, but like in the moment I made a poor decision. And so I take responsibility for that. I think he would have people back on side. And I think part of the reason why so many people are quick to throw him under the bus is because he hasn't done that. And that does show a lack of leadership. And as I said before, in Argentina's squad, you have Messi who's going to hold him to a higher standard. Who is the person in the squad that's holding him to a higher standard? Vicario and Van de Ven, well, they're fighting their own fires. And so, yeah, you look up to a guy, and I'm really, really disappointed. I've got to say, I'm really disappointed in Romero for not having come out yet, because I'm still going to give him the opportunity to do that. But I think it's disappointing. And I'm just checking again to see if he has posted something. But from what I can see, he hasn't. So for me personally, I think that's poor judgment. I'd also like to say that I think Frank was asked in his presser after the game about all of Romero's red cards, and he didn't know that Romero had so many red cards. And in a season where this season alone he's got 8 yellow cards, that's also really concerning that Frank doesn't understand Romero's character. He understands the passion, but I don't think he understands fully his character, because the opposite to ego, I said yesterday that Romero had big ego, and the opposite to ego is self-awareness. Okay, that is the opposite of ego, and how you overcome your challenges is you get out of your ego. You come into a place of self-awareness, you acknowledge responsibility for the things that you've done wrong, and then you work to improve them, whether publicly or behind the scenes. Now, what we haven't seen is Romero take accountability or responsibility for any of those things. So does he even have the self-awareness to recognize that he's part of this problem? And does Frank have the self-awareness to recognize as well that Romero is part of this problem? And to keep feeding into that narrative, to give him a pass when he makes these comments in the public domain, that throws you as the manager under the bus, and then to back your decision to make him as the manager just reads to me as if it's almost certain that Romero has a contractual obligation to be the captain. And so I don't think that position is going to change unless or until Romero leaves the club. So look, that's my little rant or piece on Romero. That could be a whole video in and of itself, but I am going to carry on, because we have a lot of other stuff to talk about. We have to talk about the game. Romero was just one moment in the game that unfortunately cost us. And I'm sure there's been other stuff that I've wanted to talk about, but I haven't had the capacity to process it. So look, I'm not going to go through minute by minute of this game, because there was nothing to rave about, to be honest. The closest we came to doing anything was Gallagher's chance or opportunity within those first 30 minutes. I think it was disappointing that obviously from that point on, our tactics led us to sit behind the ball. Now, as I just said, Oxford and Coventry drew the game 0-0 yesterday. And in another circumstance and in other times, maybe this would have been like a 2 or a 0-0. But when your team is 10 men down, and within 5 minutes of that happening, I think it was 5 minutes, 8 minutes, within 10 minutes, let's say, within 10 minutes of that happening, you then concede your first goal. And then in the second half, you make more tactical changes. And within 1 minute of doing that, you concede another goal. I think that really clearly shows the tactical, the what am I trying to say? Like the poor tactical decisions, because that ultimately changed the personnel on the pitch, which changed the state of play, which led us to leading or conceding goals. And I think United and Carrick saw that. And so they used that as the opportunity to get back at us. And it worked for them. It worked for them because when we were in that moment of disarray, and as I said, the the opposite of control is being in control. And when you're in control, your intuition takes over. You're able to read your fellow teammates across the pitch, and that is when you get into flow. Now, flow state is probably like one of the most important things in football, because when you're in flow state, the football flows and it looks good on the eye. It feels good to watch. And that, I felt, is where United are at right now. You can see that they've started to click and they've got into this sort of flow state. And it was a game of two polarizing teams yesterday, because they are the direct opposite of what we are right now, because they use that as an opportunity to kick on. And unfortunately for us, because of the style of play that we are tactically choosing right now, which is to sit back behind the ball, yes, you're going to find it very hard to push up on the front foot once you're 10 men down. However, that first goal from Mbeumo, I'm sorry, but I watched it back and Dragusin is way off. Like the fact that it had to go through 3 or 4 players before it was eventually fumbled into the back of the net. It was really like disappointing, because I'm looking at Dragusin and I'm not saying he solely is the one to blame, because look, that shot on the outside of the box is something that we've seen time and time again this season. And again, from Frank's perspective, he's not fixing these problems. We're not fixing the problems. We're conceding goals. And he said, oh, we're going to be really good at defense and we need to focus on the basics. Well, you're not getting the basics right, because you're allowing the opposition to keep having shots outside of the box time and time again. And when it's a hole in your system and other teams can see that, they're going to play to that and they're going to keep doing it until you fix and patch that up. And so we're going to keep seeing us concede goals until Frank finally goes, you know what, like someone needs to come out and close that down rather than sitting back. Having said that, I watch how slowly that goes, and I get that it goes through loads of players, and Dragusin kind of does this like lunge with his back foot, which is so off of where the ball ends up. And I'm not saying that like Dragusin is the most terrible defender ever, but what I am saying is that he should be reading that better in that situation. And you can't really blame Vicario, because he had so many players in front of him. Maybe he genuinely didn't see the ball, and he maybe thought that someone in front of him was going to clear their lines. And so I was very disappointed. And obviously Dragusin was a substitute that came on. But I did feel like he should have done better. Like he should have read that better. And I just don't think that was good enough from him. I know other players were culpable, but it was just the player that I saw in the replay back when I was watching it again. I'm thinking like he's just watching that ball come in, and like he didn't make any movement after that lunge. He made the lunge and the ball was still in front of him, and then he just watched it go into the net. I mean, maybe in real time it goes faster than that, but I did sort of question that. The other thing, Dragusin, I think the other player that I've been really let down with recently is Gray. Look, I don't want to pick holes in the team, but right now it's really hard to pick the positives. It is. In this particular game, it was hard to pick positives. We're going to talk about the relegation discussion after this, but it is really hard to be positive about your players when none of them are showing up. I think Xavi was probably the only player on the pitch, and Vicario was like absolutely fighting for everything. But I do question Archie Gray and like what he brings to the squad. He had a really terrible game yesterday. He's had a couple of really terrible games. I know he's a young kid, but I would also argue that why are we then starting him in every game? Why can't we start using him as an as an in-game sub, and rather, play your Gallaghers, your Paulinhos, and your Sars? Because unfortunately for Gray, he's playing that right back position, which it's not his forte. But even when he does play in midfield, I think he gets overrun a lot on the ball. He's not quite physically there yet. And last year he was doing these amazing spreads of the ball, and that's completely gone from his game this season. And I'm also questioning whether the system and the tactics really work for Gray. And he has had a drop off in the last few games, and it is very concerning to me, because we've spoken about the potential of Odebear, Simmons, and Solanke. Obviously, Odebear had to go off early in this game. But Archie Gray, like I do feel like there's a bit of like a hole emerging there. And look, Souza came on when Udogie went off in the second half, about 55 minutes. And considering this was Souza's debut, I thought he did really, really well. Let's not forget, he's the same age as Archie Gray. He's never played a Premier League game. And he did get knocked off the ball a couple of times. But considering Gray has been in this squad for 2 years, I would expect Gray to be ahead of Souza. And in all, I would say that Souza had a better game than Gray. Now, you guys let me know what you think about that. I think Souza had a better game than Gray. I thought, at least he was sort of pushing up. He was fighting for it. He had more accurate passes. He made, 9 out of 10 accurate passes. He wasn't on the pitch long, but I felt like he was sort of up for it. Now, I think that's also normal. You've just come into a new team. Your energy is really high because you also need to prove yourself to the manager. So I can see how maybe that mindset is different for Souza than Gray, but Gray for me is a player right now in this moment that I am concerned about. And I want to know what you guys think to that. Do you think that that's fair? Do you think I'm being harsh on Gray? Do you think that maybe he's better than what he's showing? Like, what do you think would need to happen to see the best out of Gray? That's my question to you guys. Now, and also, what did you think of Souza for his debut? Do you guys agree with me? Do you think he does have the potential maybe to be a good player for us going forward? Ideally, maybe he would have gone on loan, but it looks like he's going to be a player that is going to get more game time, especially now that Udogie's out. And on that point of Udogie, it's such a shame that the guy can't keep fit, because he is our best left back. No doubt about it. He's our best left back. But if he keeps getting injured like this, we're going to have another player on our hands who is in and out of the squad and is lacking the consistency. And when we play our ideal back four, we play the best that we played. But if the majority of games that we have, Udogie's not present on the pitch, then it's not good enough. We need someone better, or we need a first team starter, and then Udogie goes as a squad player. His skill level should be first team player. But if you can't stay fit, forget Robertson, forget Souza, you do need to be replacing Udogie in your first team. You need a first team player ahead of him. So I think that is potentially a blessing in disguise, maybe, that we didn't get Robertson, because now that leaves the window of opportunity for us in the summer to maybe get someone more long term and better than Udogie. So let me know what you guys think on that one. The other player that I wanted to mention, look, I'm not going to go through all the players. I think Paulinho was a little bit reckless. Gallagher is a bit better when he plays a bit up front. Sarr was a bit of a non-entity. We kept getting run over in midfield. It doesn't matter that you're down to 10 men. You still got to make your duels. You still got to be successful and have successful dribbles. We had like really, really bad statistics when it came to the passing levels. And the player on the pitch for us yesterday was Vicario, because Man United had 23 total shots, 10 of those were on target. And Vicario for us, I think he made about 8 saves. Is it about 8 saves? Yeah, he made 8 saves. He conceded 2 goals, but he made eight saves. And their XG yesterday was 1.49. I think in times like that, Vicario saves us, because that could have been a 4 or 5-0. And I'm really, it's promising to see from Vicario. The thing about Vicario is that he does concede. Look, all keepers are going to concede goals. And there's been a lot of questioning about Vicario's ability and about whether Vicario should be sold in the summer and whether he's good enough. And it just shows you in games like yesterday that he's not the problem in the squad. It just shows you that on his day, he fights for the team. He's so passionate for the team. And that passion, and I know he's Italian, and I know Italians are very passionate, but there were players in that squad yesterday that weren't passionate. I didn't feel like necessarily that Sarr was like a player who was going after everything. I even thought at times Mickey van der Ven was taking his foot off the gas. And, fair play to Cunha, fair play to Fernandez, fair play to Mbeumo. They had fantastic games. Even Casemiro. And Maino as well, he had his assist. So I think United had their players were up for the game. They were up for the fight. And as much as our tactics didn't work for us, there is a mindset problem at this club. There totally, totally is. And it's really disheartening to see, because now I'm going to come on and talk about the relegation talk, because that's really all there was to say on the game yesterday. And I don't want to pick apart the team any more than I already have. Look, Basuma came on, Tel came on, Muani came on. They all did nothing. It's really interesting because we'll talk about the relegation, but just another point that my friend was talking to me about swapping the tactics and how do we change formation to get the best out of this squad? And he was saying that maybe we need to switch to a 4-4-2. And if we switch to a 4-4-2, then maybe we would pick up some points towards the end of the season. And I was thinking about it last night because I was saying, like, now what is our back four going to look like? Well, it's going to look like Gray, Dragusin, Mickey van der Ven, and Souza on the left for the next 4 games. That's going to be our back four. For the next 4 games, that's going to be our back four. I can't see him going to a back 3 with Dragusin, Paulinho, and Van der Ven. Maybe he will, but I think he's going to stick with a back 4. So let's say that that's your back 4. Okay, it's not too bad. So then who's your midfield if that's the case? And I was thinking, like, maybe it's going to be like an Odebear, Sarr, Paulinho, Simmons, and then you have like a Gallagher who's going to come on. And then that leaves space for Muani and Solanke to play up top. My friend is a real fan of Muani because he's followed his career before he was at Spurs, and he rates Muani. And I said to him, but Muani's played 17 games, he hasn't scored a goal, he hasn't got an assist, he doesn't hold up the ball, he doesn't fight for us, he does nothing. My friend said that that's because the system's not working for him. And it got me thinking, like, what would that actually look like? Would a 4-4-2 actually be a viable option for us? I don't think it necessarily would suit Xavi if Xavi was playing in a 4 on the left. But what do you guys think to that? Do you think that there is some substance to that? Because clearly the 3-4-2-1 doesn't work for us. Forget the fact that Romero gets sent off, and that was before this game. He's been suspended before. So clearly that formation is not something that we can do long term because we don't have the personnel to do it. And then you say, well, the 4-3-3 or 4-3-2-1, however way you spin it, also doesn't work for us. So then maybe a 4-4-2 would be a better option for us. And how do you get the best out of Muani given the personnel that you have left on the pitch? So what do you guys think to that? Do you think that given our back 4 is likely going to be look, Spence might be back. So it's either going to be Spence or Gray. It's going to be Mickey van der Ven. It's going to be Dragusin, and it's going to be Souza. That's going to be our back 4. So do you guys think that a midfield of 4 and then an attacking force of 2 is actually going to make us a bit more aggressive on the pitch? Because when I really deep it, I'm like, actually, maybe that could be a better option than having 3 in the midfield, because we're so stacked in midfield and yet we play defensive. So we're always stacked in midfield, overly defensive, but still concede goals. So none of those pieces play together. Like, on all levels, that just doesn't work for us. So then you've got to make a change somewhere. The first sign of madness is doing that the same thing. First sign of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And the truth is, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting us to win games, and it's not coming through for us because I don't think we've won more than 2 games since October. So let me know what you guys think to that in terms of the formation, and whether you think that maybe he now changes the formation to suit the personnel going forward. Now, look, we've got tough runs coming up. So that brings us onto the relegation talk. This is not a conversation that I want to be having. And in an ideal world, I'd even ban the R word from this channel, because you guys know that I'm positive. And it's not that I'm delusionally positive. Being positive doesn't mean being uncritical. you can be you can have a positive mindset and you can have a positive mental attitude, PMA, right? You can still be positive and have positive psychology, but still recognize when things aren't going right. But to say that you're going to get relegated and manifesting that before it's actually happened when you still have games to play is self-deprecating. And so I try to avoid that language whenever I can. And that's just in my personal life across all things. Like I generally try to look on the positive side of life, and bad stuff happens to everyone. Bad stuff happens all the time to different people in different circumstances. And that's part of life. And the question isn't like, why is this always happening to us? The question is, what do we do about it? What is this trying to teach us? What lessons are we learning from this to improve from? So when we look at the relegation table, and that brings us to this conversation, and looking at our next sort of 4 or 5 games, we have Newcastle, Arsenal, Fulham, Palace, and Liverpool, which is a really tough run. Fulham, Crystal Palace, we're all in the same boat. Palace is on the same amount of points as us, 29, and so we're competing to not get relegated. And it's concerning to me that maybe we're not going to take anything out of any of those games. My friend was saying we're going to take something out of Newcastle, but I don't even want to say Dr. Tottenham, but they haven't won in their last 5 games either. So the Tuesday night at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, it's going to be a shaky one for us. Now, the saving grace, or the team that pretty much holds all of the cards in this relegation conversation up until at least the 15th of March, is Liverpool. And the reason for that is because in a couple of weeks' time, Liverpool play Nottingham Forest, then they play West Ham, then they play Wolves, and then they play us. So I can see Liverpool winning all of those games. So they play Forest, West Ham, Wolves, then us. And I can see Liverpool winning all of those games, which means that we have at least until our 5th game, until the gap of that starts to decrease, because it's guaranteed that West Ham and Forest are going to lose 3 points, assuming we're going on the conversation that West Ham is not going to beat Liverpool. And I do think Liverpool are picking up form right now. And when I looked at it, actually Liverpool have had the hardest run so far. They've probably got the easiest run out of all teams left of the season. So I think that works in their favour. And I think that works in our favour as well, because if they can get the job done, and look, it's sad that we're even having this conversation and talking about the fact that we're relying on Liverpool to beat Nottingham Forest and West Ham because we can't do it ourselves. It's ridiculous. However, that is the reality of the situation. Now, there was an article that I saw which was about the Optus supercomputer, which has predicted the where we are right now and the games we have left to play, what the likelihood is of Spurs getting relegated. So this Optus supercomputer expected that there is just a 2.35% chance of Tottenham going down. So in terms of statistics, in terms of who we've got left to play, we've got more chance of getting relegated than qualifying for Champions League. We know we're not going to qualify for Champions League, but that percentage is now 0.01% chance. So the data analysis predicts that we are going to finish 15th this season with an expected points tally of 46.28. So given that we are on 29 points, that means that you're going to pick up 17 points of the remaining games, which is about 6 wins. It's about 6 wins, or, like 4 wins and 3 draws. So 6 wins, I mean, considering how many games do we have left to play? We played 25, you've got 13 games. So in other words, we need to win at least half of our games left. I don't know if we're going to win half of our games left. So I don't know how, obviously analysis and data can only show you so much, and Optus is going on Spurs' form and the numbers that have been run. But we know the emotional fragility of the club, not just the team. We know the emotional state of the club. We know where we're at. And so when I look at our home games, it makes me very, very nervous. You know, when I look at Everton, I'm thinking, oh my God, are we even going to beat Everton? Like, I mean, how bad do you have to be for that to be a question mark, you know? So look, the upside is that Liverpool is hopefully going to be the team that saves us from relegation. They will beat us, but I'm hoping that it can give us a bit of hope for the next few games. Leeds have Chelsea. I think Chelsea beat Leeds. Forest have Wolves. I think they're going to close the gap on that one, Forest, and I think they will beat Wolves. But thankfully, they will close the gap to 3 points. Let's say, assuming we lose to Newcastle. Let's say we lose to Newcastle and Forest beat Wolves. Their next game after that would be Liverpool. So they won't win both of those games. West Ham have a very hard run because they have Man U, they have Bournemouth, and then they have Liverpool. So even it's the same situation as Forest, because even if we lose our next 2 games, the likelihood is Liverpool or Man City is going to come in and take points out of both of those teams. So you can't look at anything in isolation. You know, everything is going to impact everything. And so I think that is definitely something to consider when we're, you know, getting or losing our heads over the relegation talk, in that we have to look at the bigger picture. I mean, Leeds also have to play Aston Villa, Man City and Sunderland. I think they can probably beat Sunderland. Maybe they can get a point from Crystal Palace, but in reality, they're probably going to get beaten by Chelsea, Villa and City. So there are some positives to take from that. We still do have 13 more games to play. There is still stuff to play for. And as I said in my videos at the very beginning of starting this channel, we're playing for our pride, you know, and how proud are these players to play for our club? As fans, we, unfortunately, part of our pride of being, you know, supporters of this club is that we relish in the pleasure and the pain of all of these scenarios. But as a player, you get paid to do your job. And so when it comes down to it, when the cards are stacked against you, when everything's, you know, working against you, when decisions aren't going your way, the question is not, how you fail in those defeats. It's how you get up. It's how you move forward. It's how you show yourselves. It's how you react to those situations. And that's how I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this of like, how are you now going to respond? Because earlier in the week, I had that question for Romero. Okay, you've thrown your toys out of the pram. So how do you respond in the next game? And he responds by getting sent off. Maybe that wasn't intentional. Maybe that was a karmic response for coming out and crossing your lines. But at the same time, for the rest of these players, you know, when do they step up? What do they have to say for themselves? And that is played out on the pitch. You know, that is what matters most. And I don't see the fight. And it's concerning because, you know, the question then becomes, is Frank the fall guy? Is Frank the fall guy yet again? Have we built a squad around players that have been selected for previous managers, which don't fit Frank's style of play? And if Frank's style of play is really one that is going to be something for the long term, in which case we have bigger questions, you know, because you've just bought in the sports physio from Brentford. Well, you don't do that, and you don't give him an assistant manager if you're planning on sacking him in the summer. So it all seems very strange. It seems very strange decision making, and I'm concerned for Frank. I'm worried that if the players really aren't on board with this, then it's going to come undone even more throughout the rest of the season. So look, guys, I appreciate this has been a bit of a down tone of this video, but look, that's reflective of how we're all feeling right now. We're all feeling a little bit despondent. We're all feeling the fragmentation. We're all feeling the lack of courage, the lack of conviction, the lack of controls that we have in games. We're feeling the frustration of the players. We're seeing the recklessness on the pitch, and it's not helpful in trying to move forward and build a future that is something that Spurs can be proud of. Because right now it's not pride in finishing 15th, and it's certainly not going to be pride if we finish 18th. And guys, I have to manage your expectations, because I know I said we won't get relegated, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to end up in 18th position at some point this season. So brace yourselves, lock in. And even to me, I don't want to be part of this problem, but I am a realist, and look, all of these videos, they're said in times and in moments. And football moves so quickly that when I even look back at the Aston Villa debrief that I did, the rant, they said it was called the rant that we've all heard before. It's the same story as it is today. And so if you haven't made changes quick enough and efficiently enough in that time frame, it is deeply concerning about the direction that we're taking, because you're not moving the sails on the ship and we're still sailing off course. And so Frank has a lot of work to do, not just in terms of tactics, in terms of getting the team up for the fight, in terms of changing the mindset and the culture and the mentality of this club, because at the moment, it really, really stinks. And if we keep going on this trajectory, the only way, unfortunately, is not going to be up. So, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you're feeling today, how you're feeling about the game. Obviously, we can all enjoy the Liverpool-Man City game later today, and let's all hope that City get the win. But quite honestly, none of us really care, because this season is pretty much over for us. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. And I'm obviously going to the game on Tuesday. Tomorrow I will be on Holly Hotspurs, so you can go over there and check us out tomorrow, because we're going to be having lots of conversations. There's some other stuff coming. So you'll see those over the next few days. But thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share with your mates and all of that jazz. And I'll see you all in the next video.